The heated battle unfolding in Wisconsin over public union rights has drawn the attention of the country and has come to symbolize the larger fight between the rights of organized labor and state leaders trying to control government spending. And while the protests in the Midwest have brought the problems of the public sector to the national forefront, the country's union crisis has been brewing for many years. So just how did public unions become public enemy number one? I spoke with James MacDougald of Free Enterprise Nation to get his take.
The problem with public sector unions is that in the public sector, we, the tax-paying citizens, allow a monopoly. We say to the public sector, to whoever we create the school district or the city or whatever, and we say, you have a monopoly. We have no choice but to use the services that you're going to be providing to us. And we want to treat you fairly, and we want you to do a good job. When you allow them to unionize, you now allow them to deny the very services that you have given them a monopoly to provide.
One of the problems with collective bargaining or monopoly unionism is that union members you're forced to pay union dues in about 3/4 of the states, even if you don't want to join the union, even if you don't agree with the union's political message.
What has happened is that this monopoly has taken the states and is in the process of bankrupting them the way that the federal government has this long-term deficit. You see, the federal government is able to run a deficit, and technically the states are not running a deficit, except that they are. They're running a deficit in their pensions, estimated to be $3 trillion in unfunded liability and another $500 billion at the municipal level.
Pensions are so good, in fact, that the average Milwaukee public school teacher receives roughly $100,000 in compensation, with over $40,000 of those dollars in benefits. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker's proposal would ask state workers to put more money toward their pension and health insurance plans. But even if he got his way, Wisconsin state workers would still be contributing far less to their benefits than their private sector counterparts.
Those sorts of pensions have gone the way of the dinosaur in the private sector.
And the ones getting the big benefits, the biggest benefits, there are people in California retiring at $500,000 a year in their 50s. School teachers in Illinois retiring at $100,000 a year in their 50s with guaranteed 3% raises. The people who run those things are saying, don't worry, everything's okay. Really, we have enough money, it's fine. And when you lift the covers, you say, my gosh, things aren't fine. These people don't have enough money, they're going off a cliff, we will be broke.
In addition to the projected $3.7 trillion budget shortfall in Wisconsin, 45 other states are facing budget shortfalls, adding up to over $112 billion in the next fiscal year, thanks in part to out-of-control pensions. So how have public unions been able to game the system so effectively? The answer lies in numbers. While there are only 2 million federal workers outside the armed forces, state and local workers are 16 million strong and are able to use their union dues for political influence.
The total union dues are somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion a year. That's about $14 billion every 2-year election cycle. $14 billion. Now that hires lawyers, it hires lobbyists, it runs TV ads, it organizes groups, people to knock on doors, to make phone calls. $14 billion whose job it is to get more money from the taxpayer. Who's representing the taxpayer?
In the last election cycle alone, public employees unions donated over $87 million to political campaigns so that Democrats could retain control over Congress. The relationship with the current administration is so tight, in fact, that Richard Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, was recently caught on tape bragging about his access to the White House.
I'm at the White House a couple of times, and I have conversations every day with someone in the White House or in the administration.
For the first 6 months of 2009 in the Obama White House, the #1 visitor, according to White House logs, was the head of the SEIU public sector union. So they have been very tight with the Obama White House.
And where does President Obama come down on the issue?
Seems like more of an assault on unions. And I think it's very important for us to understand that public employees, they're our neighbors. They're our friends.
Most people don't know that President Obama signed an executive order 1 week after he took office saying that if you want to bid on a government contract of $25 million or more, the government can require that you be unionized. It's Executive Order 13502. So that in states where there are virtually no unions, if you want a government construction contract, you have to be unionized. And all your subcontractors have to be unionized.
And public union membership has exploded. 39% of state and local workers belong to a public union, more than 5 times that of the private sector. And while unions continue to grow, the private sector has shrunk by 3 million workers, putting a larger burden on the average taxpayer. The Manhattan Institute Steven Malanga explains.
If you want to understand the kind of burden that this is on a taxpayer, a couple of experts, finance experts, have looked at the unfunded liabilities of places like Chicago and New York City and also the states. They estimated, for instance, in Chicago, if you took all the tax revenues that Chicago collects and for 8 years you put the money into nothing except the pensions, you didn't pay for cops, you didn't pay for teachers or anything like that, it would take 8 years of all those tax collections in order essentially to get the pensions right.
And with the baby boomer generation getting ready to retire, the need to get pensions right has become a pivotal policy issue. But we have known about the coming strain on pensions from the baby boom for some time. So why has this reached a crisis level now?
Everybody's saying, oh my gosh, this is a terrible problem. How are we going to pay for it? What nobody has reported is that government employees generally retire at age 55 or earlier. So the baby boom began 10 years ago. 2/3 of government retirees, baby boomers, are already retired. They've taken their money and started retiring in the last 10 years. During that same 10 years, awful events happened. The tech wreck happened, the dot-com bust, 10 years ago. So right at the time they lost 20 or 30% of their pension assets, waves of people started retiring. And then what happens at the end of the 10 years? We have the real estate bust and the market crashes again. Now we have high unemployment, way less taxes being paid in, huge numbers of people retiring, way less money in the pension funds than we ever thought we would have 15 or 20 years ago, fractions of what we need, which means public sector workers who are sitting there fat, dumb, and happy thinking they're going to get these huge pensions better be as concerned about it as the taxpayer is, because they're going to find out they're not going to get their pension.
And cities are running out of money. Take a look at Pritchard, Alabama. That city abruptly stopped paying their pensioners in 2009 after it went bankrupt. And it could set a disturbing precedent for larger cities like Chicago and New York that cannot keep promises on underfunded pension plans.
They use bogus Ponzi reporting, bookkeeping. It doesn't work. There's no actuary in America that will really support the way they're reporting the numbers to us. They've been reporting to us, virtually all of them. They've been telling us we've been making 8% a year for the last 10 years when they've made nothing. They have not been making their deposits to the plan. They're giving bigger and bigger retirement and cost of living benefits to their retirees. They are going to go broke and they know it. And what they're telling us is everything's fine, and it isn't.
As the protests in Wisconsin illustrate, union workers and their lavish benefits are being singled out for contributing to many of the state's fiscal problems. But are they to blame? Is it fair that the public sector has a target on its back?
Both of my parents worked in the public sector. My father was in the Army for 25 years. My mother worked for civil service. They are the people that worked hard. They took the deal that was provided to them. They didn't get it. They didn't go ask for it. That was a deal that was made. They ran their lives around the promise that this is what your pension is going to be. They expect to get what they were promised, and you can't blame them for that. They're not doing anything wrong. The problem is promises have been made that cannot be kept. One of the things we're trying to say is, let's just play fair. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We want our public servants to be well paid. If they're not paid well enough, let's pay them more. If we're not paying high enough to get them to take the job, let's pay them more. But let's not hide the fact that in order to appear to be paying less to hire a new government worker, we're going to, at the back end, when they're in their 40s or 50s, come up with a couple of $1 million to make up for the fact that we didn't come up with a couple of $1,000 a year to pay them a fair wage.
In addition to curbing worker benefits, one solution being offered in Congress is a pension transparency bill that would make the public sector report financial results with the same standards as the private sector. But what other options are out there that can honor the work of our public servants and keep costs under control? Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute had this to offer.
We've got to go after these defined benefit pension plans for government workers. Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, is trying to get government workers to at least contribute more to their pension and health care plans. And I think all new workers for the government ought to be put on 401k style plans, which are much cheaper for taxpayers.
If we know the problem and how to fix it, why is it taking so long to implement a solution?
We have to have elected officials who are not afraid of losing office. The problem has been for such a long time that these unions are so powerful and so expert at political organizing that they essentially threaten members of both parties. And what you get is instead you wind up getting one party in the states. It's called the incumbency party. Everybody wants to stay in office. Chris Christie, one of the reasons he's such a threat to them is he keeps saying, I don't care if I'm only a one-term governor, I'm going to do what I need to do. We need more politicians like that, and I actually think that what's going to wind up happening is that the taxpayer and the voter will respond to that, and maybe they won't be one-term governors.
The battle underway in states like New Jersey and Wisconsin is just the opening salvo in a long fight over the rights of public employees in the country. There are 16 other states considering legislation that would significantly curtail the power of public unions. And the numbers look to be in favor of bold leadership. A recent Rasmussen poll showed that 48% of voters backed Governor Walker in Wisconsin, while only 38% sided with the unions. Chris Christie, the outspoken governor of New Jersey, enjoys a 57% job approval rating. If leaders are able to have their way and reform collective bargaining in their states, it could revolutionize America and shape the fiscal landscape in positive ways for years to come. For PJTV, I'm Alexis Garcia.